So I want all of you to look at your hands. The palms, the back of your hands. And I want you to think for yourself, have you ever made something? Have you ever created something with these hands? Have you done that? Have you ever done maybe some of these things? Have you ever built your own home? Have you written a poem? Have you composed a song? Have you painted a portrait? Have you planted a garden? Have you quilted something? I know that's some of you. Have you quilted something? But have you made something with your hands before? I talked about my Lego fun when I was a kid, making that, right? Have you ever made something? And what's that feeling when you're done of making something? Joy, being accomplished, a satisfied feeling that you have made something. Do you remember that awe that you must have felt when you looked at your masterpiece and you thought to yourself, I did that. I put my own energy and hands into making that. Whatever that creation could be. Ever that feeling that you've made something and then you wanted to show it off to other people, right? I had it for a class in seminary. I had to make a diagram of the sanctuary, this one. And it had to be a perfect scale diagram to take to my class. And I remember with a tape measure in here, but when I was finished, I wanted to show the world. I was so proud that I have a perfect replica of this sanctuary. But I think all of us have made something. And we've been so inspired, so amazed at what we could do, that you just wanted to show off that creation or that thing to someone else. So I think we can reflect upon that. But like I shared with the kids this morning, I think there's a different level of joy that God must have felt, or that God feels when God looks at the beautiful creation that God created. That God created the whole world. I think the work of God's hand is quite amazing, actually. Looking at the beauty that's around us. One of my favorite photos of Earth is this. Not the hands. This one. I love this photo. If I could get this like a large picture, I would just love that, right? I mean, it's a picture from the moon looking down at the earth, and I love that. I mean, I love looking at the pure beauty of the earth. It looks much better, I think, from the moon than it does sometimes when we're just walking around, right? Look at that, right? The blue in the seas, right? You can see, I think that's actually, it looks like to me sub-Saharan Africa. Maybe I'm wrong, but it kind of looks like that, the flat land. I love looking at the clouds and the spirals of the earth. I love looking at that, and then I always look at that and I'm kind of like, God made that. How cool is that? Look how beautiful that is. There are two astronauts that when they were in space, they reflected upon looking at this picture. One of them was Roger, and he was on Apollo 1, and he wrote this. The world itself looks cleaner and so much more beautiful. Maybe we can make it that way, the way that God intended it to be, by giving everybody the new perspective from out in space. It looks cleaner and more beautiful. But then Edgar Mitchell on Apollo 14 said this, my view of our planet was a glimpse of divinity. Looking at the world and the earth was a glimpse of the divine, a glimpse of seeing God at work. I love thinking about the earth that we live on. When I was preparing for the sermon this week, I actually imagined in my office, what would it be like to be an astronaut? I thought I might have a mid-career change and become an astronaut because I would love that experience of going into space and looking back down at the beautiful earth creation that God made. And just like I think those two astronauts, that they were amazed, I love the beginning words of Psalm 8 that reflect upon the same beauty. Words like, O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. When I look at your heavens, when I look at your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, right? There's this joy, this majesty joy looking at the earth. And I love this psalm. I rarely preach from psalms, and I was glad when I looked at the lectionary that there was a psalm that I really liked. Because I love this, because this is really a hymn that's directed towards God. It's David writing this psalm directly towards God, and it's a form of affirmation, affirming the presence and love of God and the beauty of God as creator and sovereign leader over the world. To the moment I think of creation, God's name is etched across the entire cosmos. I think the entire earth and cosmos has the echoes, or the seal, or the footprint, or the handprint of the incredible being of love that we call God. And I think Psalm 8 has this beautiful language of being awed yet again by the majesty and mystery of God as creator over the world. So we breathe, we have oxygen, we enjoy the air around us, the matter to sustain us through life. But I wonder, how often are we awed by God's creation? I think if we look at this picture again, how often are we awed by the incredible creation of God? When we look around, how often do we think, wow, God, you have created something beautiful among us. And I always think about this photo. I'm usually not awed until I look at a photo like this. And then I'm just amazed at the mystery of our God to create something like that. And then we know that we're just a part of that. We're in that. I love it because I think sometimes we lose the mystery and the thought of being a child, the wonder of looking at the earth. So let's imagine if we were all kids again. Can we do that for a moment? Let's imagine that we were kids. So I see some head shaking no, but let's just imagine that we were kids for a moment, right? Remember the childlike wonder that we had as a kid? Things like, we would ask kind of bizarre questions like, how do dinosaurs exist, right? Or questions like, how does Santa Claus get to every single house on December 25th? Like in 24-hour period, how does he go to every single house? Or we ask questions about God. Or we ask questions about death or rules. Or we ask questions like, where do babies come from? But I think there's this beautiful wonder and childlikeness of being a child. Of just wondering how the world exists and how everything fits in together. And I wonder if we sometimes lose that as adults. We feel like we get enough answers and we stop wondering about the mystery and the joy and the creation of this earth or the things in it by God. I wonder if we miss that childlike wonder, that childlike awe, that childlike joy of looking at the earth that we live on. Because I think we too have questions about how the world works. Like, we wonder just about God's existence and that's it. Or we wonder why God chooses to act in some ways, or why God doesn't act in other ways. Or we ask, like, why did God even create the world? Or we wonder, why did God create the animals that God did? And I really specifically ask this question because I want to know, why did God make mosquitoes, right? I'm going to camp next week, and the one thing I hate about camp is mosquitoes, right? And I want to ask that, why did God make mosquitoes that bite us when we're outside in God's creation? But I think we have questions like this. I think we ask questions because even in the midst of certainty of who God is, there are still things we do not understand about God, about the Christian faith, about the world that we live in. We have a lot of answers. We know some things about God, but I think there are still some things that we don't know. There are some things that we don't understand yet. And even though how specific Psalm 8 is, and I love it, how specific it is in describing the majesty of God's creation, that there's still this mysterious aspect of our God, that even in the midst of certainty of who God is, there is still a level of mysteriousness about God. Even in the midst of the many questions that you and I have about God and all of these things, I think there's a recognition that God is illimitable. Now, I didn't make up this word. I really like this word, and I only use this word to describe God. I heard it like 7 years ago, and I love this word, and I've been waiting to use it in the sermon, and today's the day, that God is illimitable, meaning that God is without limits. That God is not bound by anything else. That God is so majestic, so vast, so great, that there is more to God that we have yet to experience or see. So God is without limits, or God is illimitable, if I may say that word. But why is this the case, you may ask? What is the heart of this? I think the heart of this is you and I, we are finite beings. We are finite beings. What does that mean? That we have a beginning and we have an end. So this is how I want to talk about us being finite beings. Have you ever wondered, I bet you haven't, have you ever wondered how high you can count in your lifetime? Have you ever wondered that? How high could you count from the moment when you first began living till the day you die? Have you ever wondered how high you can count? Well, I did a little math equation. In 60 seconds, I can count from 1 to 224 very quickly in 60 seconds. I mean, that's going like fast, okay? So I can count to 224 in 60 seconds in a lifetime. From the moment I was born until the day I die, I can count this high, only this high. If all I did was counting, of course. 8,830,080,000, that's all I can get to. So 1 to 8 plus billion, that's all I can get to. If all I do is count, 1 to that from the moment I was born to the moment I die at 100. That's all I can count to. So what does this mean? There's a limit to how high I can count, isn't there? There's a limit to how high. Some of you could probably beat me and get more than just 8 billion, but get to 9 billion, right? But there's a limit to how high that we can count. I think this is a symbolism to demonstrate how finite you and I are. There are limits to the things that we can count. But I think there's a limit to our knowledge at times. Or there's a limit to our understanding of the world around us. And so what does that mean? That means that we need to have an infinite creator, an infinite being that we name God, who reveals God's self to us to find. So God is infinite, right, without limits. And we need God who's without limits to show us, people who have finite thinking. We can only see the world through one very narrow view. But we need God to help broadcast and reveal more of God to us. Does that make sense? That we are finite, we are matter, we have a beginning and an end, we have limits. But God, in God's limitless self, reveals God's creation and reveals God's self to us. This beautiful masterpiece to us. So God, in God's limitless way, created, reveals God's masterpiece to us. So God, in God's limitlessness, reveals the earth to us, finite people. I think I love Genesis 1:1. And the kids clearly knew Genesis 1:1 this morning. But I even love the language. Often we read, like, in the beginning God created, right? And I love that transition, but I love a different translation even more. It says that when God began to create, or when God created, meaning that God is not even bound by the earth that we live in. That God is not even bound by creation. That God is so great that God is even outside of the created matter that God made. And so I think this is the simple truth this morning. That God is so amazing and so incredibly talented that God made this beautiful earth that we live in. And I think that leads us to be awestruck and leads us to enjoy the beauty of the earth, right? I hear what some of you enjoy to do for your vacations or time away. We love to see mountains. We love to see different parts around the country and the world. And I think that is there because God desired us to enjoy the creation that God made for us. But there's another great truth, I think, that's found in Psalm 8. And it's found in Psalm 8, 4 and 5. What are human beings that you, it's directed towards God, that you, God, are mindful of them, being human beings, mortals that you care for them. Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. So I think what is not mysterious is the incredible love that God has for us humans and the position that he created us, a little lower than God. I think the work of the Trinity, we witness that God was perfect love for God's creation. That God, I think, is without limits for love and in love with you and with me. So, we may not, or let me be a little bit more definitive, we don't have all the understanding of the world. I would love that, right? Wouldn't you love to know everything? Maybe you wouldn't, but maybe you would love to know more about how the world works and why bad things happen and all the questions that we ask. We don't know all of that. We're finite. There's limits to our thinking and understanding. But I think there is a God who's without limits, who knows everything, and has the path for us. So I think God is the God of everything, and cares for us, and was mindful of us. So God created everything, and yet still sought and thought of us as worthy enough to care and be mindful for. So what does it mean to be mindful? To have intentionality and concern and care for you and for me. So there are two simple things I want you to do this week in light of Psalm 8. The first one is this. I want us to be overjoyed by the created world again, to have a sense of awe and wonder at the world that we live in. And I think what we're doing is just enjoying the sovereignty and majesty of our God. And so I want us to keep singing about this God. But I want you to do something else. This is, I don't think I've ever asked you to do something like this before. So today is something new. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go home and make something this week. I want you to go home and create something this week. If you paint, paint. If you like to work in the wood shop, go make something in the wood shop. If you like to sing, write your own song. If you like to plant a garden, do something new in your garden this week. If you like to cook, cook something new and invite me over. But I want you to go and create something this week. And I want you to use your hands. And I want you to be slow and be so intentional. I want you to observe. Be observant of the movement of your hands, the feelings that you feel. And as you do that, imagine God creating the world. Imagine God creating the facial expressions that we sometimes use to express ourselves on our faces. I want you to imagine God creating the grass that we enjoy laying. I want to imagine the work of God around us. And I think we can do that this week by us also being creators of something new. And then when we're done, and we've created something new, and you invite your pastor over to eat it, and when you get finished, imagine the joy and satisfaction that we have in God, that God did that for us. And God was that slow and intentional for creating the world around us, but also being mindful of you and being mindful of me, and allowing us to be one step lower than God. So may we wake our wonder to know more about God and the God that we love and enjoy. So go home this week, make something, and let me know how you discover God in the midst of that creation.